everyone. Welcome back to But Why Love the Podcast. And today we are talking about Game of Thrones because we have to talk about Season 8. As always, I'm Kate and I'm here with Adrian.
Hey, how's it going?
In a surprise to no one, Matt is not here as he also was not on our Season 7 episode. And we have a special guest to come and share the love of Game of Thrones and join the conversation. That's Danny.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
I'm excited to have you here. I'm happy Adrian asked you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm glad that worked out.
Because I knew this was going to be an episode because of the 10-year anniversary last month, but I didn't know how it was going to go. But Danny was like, I have opinions on season 8, and I was like, great, that's exactly what we need. We need all the opinions.
So Danny, why don't you intro yourself, tell people where you're from, what you do, and why you're here to talk about Game of Thrones before we kick it off to Adrian.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Danny. I do a podcast where we talk about comic books and pop culture stuff. And we make videos and stuff. It's called the Next Issue Podcast. I recently, throughout this whole past year, I actually met Kate and Adrian through the But Why Though community Discord server, which is an amazing place to hang out. And yeah, we just been like, I love pop culture. I love comics. I love anything that is, fantasy genre based. So like any kind of entertainment, I'll check it out because I like looking at all different kinds of things. So that's kind of what brought me here. I saw you guys were talking about Game of Thrones, and I chimed in, and here we are.
Awesome. Well, if you've been listening to any one of our Game of Thrones episodes, then you know that Adrian is the most qualified to talk about this. So I'm going to hand the reins over to him.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about, let's rewind. Sorry, I'm getting into my thoughts on season 8 and things like that. I got feelings. I don't know how
I'm
to
waiting
place
for you to screen share a PowerPoint, honestly.
How else can you do Game of Thrones without, extensive whiteboards? We're watching right now with one of my friends, and we got like a whiteboard and like started doing family tree lines so that she could understand all the characters a little bit better because there's a lot in that first season that just get thrown at you. But Game of Thrones did celebrate its 10-year anniversary, April 17th, 2021. And it's been 2 years since we've had any kind of Game of Thrones content with the end of season 8. So we'll kind of talk about a little bit of retrospective on season 8 and what's to come in the future because we do have a lot coming down the pipeline for Game of Thrones. But if you know anything about Game of Thrones and if you were around 2 years ago when we were all losing our minds, you probably haven't talked about Game of Thrones much since then after talking about it for 10 years straight. So we're going to kind of talk about, why that happened and what we think, why, or if that would ever happen again, like what would be the next thing for that to happen to you. So for our intro question, we'll just kind of place everybody from the get-go. But for season 8, which boat were you in? Were you in the this season is terrible in D&D, shouldn't get any more projects, or were you in the it was okay, or were you I enjoyed it? We'll start with Kate.
So you're talking about after season 8 or
Yeah,
like
after
season 8
season 8,
after?
like
So D&D has done their own like mess that like made me think that they shouldn't get any projects. But Confederate. But in a bubble where Game of Thrones is the only thing that exists and not taking into account the other like foolery, I wasn't necessarily in there only because personally I don't like a bad ending is a bad ending, but it doesn't erase the journey that we went on to get to this, which they also did and was very good. And so it is one of those things where like I think that what it taught me was they need to have restraints. They're not creators who can go and do everything they want because if they don't have budget constraints, if they don't have push from other people, they're going to do dumb things. Because I mean, and other creators have like Tim Burton's movies suck when you give him a giant budget. You limit his budget, he makes better movies. Beetlejuice, case in point. But I also think it looks at the circumstances too, because like they rushed through that project because they were supposed to get that Star Wars project, and they've even talked about that. And that point is hard. But again, yes, just based on the season, I'm going everywhere now. Just based on the season itself, I don't necessarily think they shouldn't get stuff. It's all the other stuff around it, like their interviews and like that kind of stuff, where I've been like, maybe, maybe you should sit down for a little bit. Go sit in the corner, think some, and come back later.
What about you, Danny? Did you have fond feelings for season 8 and D&D? Were you mixed? Were you in the middle?
Um, so as far as the creative team, I'm not I was not familiar with them before this, and maybe it's because maybe they hadn't done anything as big as Game of Thrones. Um, uh, Going into the show, I've never read the books. I've read a little bit of the comics, but the comics are really just kind of based on. It feels like they're based on the TV show instead of the actual books, which is pretty interesting. So I didn't have any like extra baggage or feelings coming into even watching the show. And then as far as season 8, I can definitely I can definitely see where it's not as good as the beginning of the show. You know, the first few seasons. Um but overall, I think the part that this season, especially season 8, gave me the most was we treated it as an event. Like we would get together at my buddy's house and get, he has a really nice setup, and we would get excited week to week. I forgot how much fun I had watching stuff week to week until more recent shows have started doing that again, as opposed to binging. But yeah, just watching, and then Sunday nights we all get together, Game of Thrones, and we'll have dinner beforehand. Like all that stuff really added to my experience of watching season 8. Uh, it has a lot of really cool moments. Uh, um, I like a lot of the characters, and we'll go more into detail into specifics, I guess. But overall, I think that, like Kate mentioned, the journey, like I feel like maybe we didn't get where like everybody thought we were gonna get to, but I still got to a place where I really enjoyed the show. And because I don't follow the creators as closely, like I don't look at all their interviews and stuff. I like looking at some of the behind the scenes stuff, and all that stuff feels like everyone was just working their asses off in the winter wonderland that they shot everything in. So like all that stuff just makes me appreciate the show a lot better. So many cool creators that have moved on to do other things, like the directors and stuff that they brought in for season 8. So yeah, I really enjoyed the experience of it, even if the story was not the best, like that I feel we could have gotten.
That's the most wholesome take I've ever heard for season 8.
I know. I was like, my heart.
Because I feel bad that I'm going to say I hated that season with the passion of a thousand suns.
I know. I'm
Uh,
expecting you to be like, I hated it, and I will fight D&D in a Target parking lot.
because a lot like you, Danny, like we treated that like an event which we hadn't done really before. Like so much so that like that group is still the group that I watched like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier with and things like that. And everyone was angry while we watched it. So we didn't have a Danny in our group who, could shine some like positive light. So I think as we watched it, we all just got progressively more angry as it went. I think is what happened with us. And I do enjoy the journey. And I didn't, because when I was one of those people who was like, you need to watch Game of Thrones. Have you watched Game of Thrones yet? Like, I got like people like JoJo people. I was a JoJo person, but for Game of Thrones. Like, I'm recommending it to everybody
Hold
because
on,
I
hold
think it's
on.
the best TV ever.
That is an extremely good like explanation for a person who recommends you for something, and I'm gonna steal that because
Please do,
holy
because that's how I
crap.
felt. I went from recommending it to everybody to not recommended to anybody for like 2 years. Like so much so that I hadn't watched an episode after that thing, and that's after going through a rewatch like every single year for like 10 years.
I
And
will say, to your point, I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I went from the hype of wanting to talk about it with everybody to nope, not doing
fair,
this.
That's
hundred
funny.
percent fair.
I was the guy at the office that people knew I was watching the show and I was excited about it. So like they would come ask me like, and I was like, yeah, get into it. Like I think it's worth you at least checking it out. All right. So yeah, kind of like that, kind of like the same. And even even after season 8, I would still encourage people to go watch it and kind of judge for yourself like how this TV show lands the ending.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So we're rewatching with one of our friends who's staying with us, and we didn't want to do it, but we watched that first episode of Game of Thrones, and it was it was a wrap. And I was like, all right, I'm getting sucked back in. Here we go again. I'm doing poses like the JoJo people, but like in my head on a throne.
Yeah.
So it's good. We're on season 3. The red wedding's about to happen. She
Oof.
has no idea. I'm so excited. Watching it with someone who's never watched it before is like an insane experience because I never like rewatched it with someone who hasn't watched it before.
Or read the books. Like when we
Yeah.
get to that part, like even in season one, when we get to the end of season one, I'm like, this is your main character, right?
Yeah, they just go for it.
Yeah.
So I am less angry now 2 years later, but I'm not looking forward to season 8. Even after doing these notes, like stuff was coming back to me. Like it was just not a good relationship that I wasn't a super big fan of. But we'll kind of jump into, obviously we're not going to go into like a whole kind of background of the production history and things like that. The show's been out for a while. If you want to refer back to it, episode 28, that's still all on the website and everywhere else you can find us. You can find up to that episode was right before season 7. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
2017, um we do it then we do kind of like a recap of season 7 right before season 8. So we do have some Game of
Yeah.
Thrones content
And I
out
would
there.
actually say like it's really good to listen to both of them like back to back because my opinion actually changes from that first recording that we have to season 7
Yeah.
because I did a full rewatch of the entire series going into season 7 and then watch season 7, which season 7 for me is probably one of my favorites. So like it's actually a really good pairing between the two.
Yeah. So kind of what we talked about, if you just want to kind of quick recap, kind of too long, didn't listen, and there's a whole lot of content out there right now, so I totally understand. But some of the big things that we did cover in that episode were the elements of all of the best shows, definitely at that time, and I would say even now, kind of in one show. So you have political intrigue with Veep. I was gonna say House of Cards, but that
Yeah, no,
stuff.
no.
Vikings, you have the sword and board and the really good plot for everybody. Everybody gets a little plot in this show. Uh,
Plot.
yeah. Quotations plot, yeah. Kate plot. Uh, when The Walking Dead was good, you had lots of like twists and turns, and you didn't know if your favorite character was going to die from week to week, which Game of Thrones definitely had. And then you definitely
Yep.
had the supernatural, magic-y, fantasy elements as well that kind of all fit in one.
So
I
question. Oh,
I
sorry, go
have a
ahead.
question. No, I was just gonna say, when I saw your notes, I was like, wait, did he put Supernatural in this list? Because I definitely agree, but I don't think that's where you were going. But sorry.
So no, so what I actually wanted to bring up, I think it's funny that this is like the list that we use to kind of compare because three of those last shows have been called out for going on way too long and losing their value in the end.
Yeah.
Cuz like Vikings so amazing and then Ragnar's gone and it's like whoop dip in quality. Walking Dead, must we say more? Uh I still love Supernatural with all my heart, but I admit the last like 7 seasons are trash, but please put it into my eye holes.
Yeah.
So like I do like as we go into this, and it's probably something I want to bring up is like Netflix giving us smaller shows and like having timelines that aren't stretched out like for a whole bunch. So
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yes, sorry. Oh
Yeah, so it's like this is very like 2017 things, and I couldn't really think of like honestly because there's nothing really on. We're barely starting to get like our big shows back. I couldn't think of any good comparisons. But I think when I would recommend this show to people, and people were like, "Well, I don't like high fantasy," or like, "I don't like fantasy," or whatever. Like, well, do you like political intrigue? Do you like backstabbing? Do you like hot people on TV. Like there's a lot to this show than just, the aesthetic of it that makes it really good. So that was something that we definitely talked about in that episode. And of course, we talked about the storytelling and the characters and kind of how good they are, how good they are at being good, how good they are at like making you hate and person for with like all the passion in the world that you just want bad things to happen to that character.
Yeah.
And I think general consensus would be up to season 7. They did a pretty good job of adapting material and then going on to do their own things when they outpaced the books. So the storytelling elements were definitely there leading up to season 7. There's a kind of like I guess there's probably more of like a general split in season 7 from my understanding. I like season 7, but I know some people don't. But just kind of the overall can good guys don't always win like Danny said, guy our hero, but looking back is just a dummy, just bad, just dumb guy.
Dumb dumb.
Uh,
He's a himbo without the body. Like
yeah, he's a himbo
that's
without
him.
like the endearing qualities. Because when I watched it again, I was like, oh, dude, you just like ruined everything. Like this is kind of all your
There's a
fault a little
difference.
bit.
So that's the difference. So like one of the things, and I always say this, everybody's like himbos are dumb. I was like, no, himbos are emotionally intelligent and they use it to drive all of their choices.
Right.
Jon Snow is both dumbs. Like he doesn't get it emotionally and he doesn't get it strategically.
He knows
Yeah.
nothing. They told us. They let us know early in the show.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
like-
look, as somebody that put all their eggs in Rob Stark's basket,
Yeah, that's
Early-
a fun. That's a
early
fun
on
thing
in
to
the-
watch.
yeah. early on in the show, I was like, oh, okay, I'm behind Rob Stark. I get where the show is now. You can't fool me twice, and they did.
And
And
I
they
will
just
say
kept on
too,
doing it.
like for like all the characters that it has that like really creates like I hated Sansa Stark. And me and Adrian disagree here, but I hated her so much, and I actually think she becomes a phenomenal character in 7 and 8
Yep.
to me. And I actually wrote a piece about like so this is the thing. I wrote 2 think pieces, one about Arya and one about Sansa in the middle of season 8, and then I left season 8 never wanting to touch it again. But like I do think like the character arcs in this show are really good, minus Jon Snow, and then and season 8. Like season 1 to like 8.4, great character building.
Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of like the big thing for season 8, right? Because then you kind of throw away all of Jamie's long and strenuous character development. You know Daenerys's character development, and there's just so much stuff thrown away. In my opinion, because they do such a good job
Yeah.
of world building and doing callbacks, and making you remember the thing that happened in season 1. And then I think that a little bit of that does get lost in season 8. But overall, again, like you said in the beginning, and like Danny said, the journey is great.
Yeah.
Like watching these characters grow is great. Watching Sansa go from like season 1 Sansa to season 2.5, where she's like, Joffrey's like my only one true love,
Oh.
after she almost gets shot in the chest with a crossbow bolt. Like she gets it pretty early. But I just think they kind of like fumbled her a little bit in season 8 compared to season
Yeah.
7 too.
I think they
I know
should have
we're
just
split on this. We
Yeah.
talked about it. We talked about it in another
Yeah.
episode. But I do like her development even in those early seasons.
I
That
also think it's
she
hard
gets
because I
the
love her
game.
fashion in season 8. Like she just
This is
comes off
true.
as a cold hard bitch like that entire time. I'm, you know what, I'm with you. Give her all the power, and then
Yeah.
then they build her up for it, and they're like, no,
Yeah.
actually, she gets nothing. I'm like what?
Yeah, and then
Then
of course
why?
the
Okay,
variety
so-
of characters, right? Like there's somebody for everybody, right? Because especially
Yeah.
early on, like you're trying to figure out who do you root for. And in the early stages, there was a lot of people to root for. And even in the quote unquote bad side, there were people to enjoy, like Tyrion with the Lannisters. You're not supposed to like the Lannisters, but you're like, oh well, Tyrion's a good guy, I guess. Maybe Varys is a good guy, maybe. Who knows? Oh, he's an asshole. So there's a lot of variety in the characters to have that facilitate those kind of discussions.
Oh, I mean, also my girl Cersei. She's evil. She's awful. I don't like her on a moral standpoint. But Lena Headey in
Oh.
that role, like
Perfect.
actually, like she's terrifyingly calculating and really well done as a villain.
Yeah.
Until like season 8.4.
And like she's one of my favorite
she's
characters.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love
she's
watching
good.
her because she definitely like it's very different because like the Joffrey hate was like this kid is both annoying and a sociopath. Cersei for me is more like just a true villain and a true evil. And I think that that's what makes her really good. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm jumping.
And-
I'm jumping.
No,
all
you're
over the
good,
place.
you're
I'm
good.
sorry. I'm excited. I haven't talked about Game of Thrones since the end of season 8 at all with anybody in any context. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I'm only going on a couple weeks, so I'm excited. I'm excited too. So, and before we kind of move on to the season 8 stuff, we did obviously we talked about some of the stuff that was taboo, stuff that they just didn't handle very well, especially kind of in the later seasons, in both like the adaptations and like their just their execution, but also some of the stuff that a lot of shows, at least in 2011, right, aren't really kind of doing when you're talking about interrelational relationships, same-sex relationships, bisexual relationships, but then also like their treatment of women was really, really bad, like those last couple of seasons, just like unnecessarily bad for really no reason. And it's a gory show. There's lots of body
Throw them all
mutilations.
away. Throw all the women away.
Yeah, we're going through an under rewatch where Theon just got his sausage chopped right off. So there's a lot of I forgot sometimes like how graphic the show gets. So there's a lot of cool things, but there's a lot of things that you know require greater discussion, which I think we covered pretty well in our previous Game of Thrones content. So if you want to go check that out, you're definitely go do that. So before we kind of move into kind of season 8 and beyond, is there anything else that you feel like you need to kind of mention about what kind of drew you into the show or what it does differently, or do you kind of think we can kind of get that in the rest of the show?
I got a quick thing that it's
Yeah,
really
go for it.
so as the 10th year anniversary thing is happening too. I'm working on a few videos for our channel, and one of them is like how I started watching Game of Thrones, and it's just a quick story that I like to tell, especially people that I haven't talked about Game of Thrones with. In 2011, when the show was coming out, Stars was also doing a show called Camelot. At the same time, they were gonna premiere at the same time, and I was like, well, I only have room for one new show that's kind of about medieval stuff in my life. And the reason I went with Game of Thrones was because uh, I was a big fan of Mark Addy, who had he had a sitcom at the time. He had been in a few movies that I really like, and I was like, well, I think I gotta watch this one. And then looking back, I was like, well, I picked the right one because Camelot, I don't think it went past 2 seasons, and Game of Thrones just kind of exploded. So thanks to Mark Addy, I picked the right horse to put on, my watching behind.
I was a late, actually, like, kind of to celebrate like the 10 years of it. I was late to Game of Thrones. I don't think I watched it till season 3, whatever came out, like my last year of college. That's 2014,
Mm.
2013. I don't know. Whatever season correlates to that. And I binge watched it, and then I watched it. And then we had like my Arabic class, like we all got together and watched it all together and like did a whole bunch of cool stuff, and it that was fun. And I think that it's the only show that I've ever appreciated as week to week, because I feel like it's also the first I feel like it's the first show that really lived on Twitter. Like, we have
Yeah.
everybody do live tweets of things now, but like nothing like that. And I don't know if we talked about it in the Game of Thrones thing in our past episodes, but like that would be the one thing I would add is like over the course of its 10-year run, I feel like it's a show that really benefited from social media. And it was one of those where like even if you didn't watch it with people or make it an event yourself, it was probably the first exposure into forming an online community around something for a for a weekly watch that I really loved.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna put the stats in here, but kind of trying to generate the scope of what Game of Thrones was during that 10 years if you weren't on the train or if you got on there late or whatever the case is. But it was like the most trending thing on social media throughout like almost its entire run after season 2 because of the viewership spiked and everything
Yeah.
was going through the roof. What was one of the other stats? It was like simulcast in like 174 countries or something like that. It was huge. It was huge, and I don't think that we've had anything like that since, and definitely not something that I had in our at least like my adults ish hood,
It,
right? Because
it's
I mean, The Sopranos obviously like is like a big weekly watch and those things, but I'm just too young to like know what The Sopranos was going on there.
Also,
it's
like I just don't think online culture has fit around any other show in the same way, because like
Yeah.
I think that there was a big difference. Like I don't like weekly releases because not everybody has the same access to it, because like you end up with people watching something at like 2 a.m. when it drops and then ruining it for everybody
Mhm.
else. Whereas like game and so like episodically on a streaming platform is very different than it is coming on at this time. Everybody will watch this at the
Mhm.
same time.
Yeah.
And that is when you know to like get your spoiler
Yeah.
tags ready, like watch everything. And then I think, and I think that that's because I don't like episodic television now because it's on streaming platforms and it's a very big disparity. Like Yodito was spoiled for me. Like
Yeah.
that sucked. Um and so I think like that is what separates it, and I don't think that there has been another show that came in at a time slot that had that same impact or is even
Yeah,
done today, because we get like tags for like Falcon and Winter Soldier or Mandalorian and stuff, but
Yeah.
like it's not like it's not an event happening at the same time with everyone. It's like a 2 day
exactly.
span as
Yeah.
people roll in and watch.
Yeah, people aren't moving their time slots to compete with,
Yeah, exactly.
WandaVision as good as WandaVision did, or even The Mandalorian as good as The Mandalorian is. No one's moving time slots for that. And I mean, and no one moved. I mean, but people were moving and going out of their way to watch season 8, despite everything we've said in the first 20 minutes of our show today. People watched Game of Thrones season 8, and the viewership went up every single episode, but the ratings also went down. Well, it kind of fluctuated a little bit in those first three, but viewership, as a trend, went up the whole time, and the ratings definitely went down. So, for some context, episode 1, Winterfell, 11.76 million with a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I thought the premiere was great. It was reported that the premiere was pirated nearly by 55 million people in the first 24 hours of its release. And of those numbers, 9.5 million downloads came from India, 5.2 came from China, and 4 came from the United States. So lots of people illegally streamed that first episode for sure. Episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kings, we're still going strong. Has a slight dip, 10.2 million with an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it really starts to dip here going into the third episode, because this is kind of in Kate's kind of 8.4 metric of what she's been using. So The Long Night, 12 million, 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, and then episode 4, The Last of the Starks, 11 million, 58% on Rotten Tomatoes. Episode 5, The Bells, 12.4, 49% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the infamous Iron Throne season 6 or episode 6, 13.6 million, 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. Season 8 overall on Rotten Tomatoes had a 54% critic score with 21 critics and a 30% audience score with 14,000 people scoring, which is far below any of the other seasons, which all have 90%, including that first season. However, despite all of this, terrible ratings, it still ends up with 5 out of the 6 most watched episodes in the series. And episode 6 broke The Sopranos' record for viewership, which had 13.43 million all the way back in 2002 with this season 4 premiere,
And
which
I think
is crazy.
I think a lot of it, honestly, because I know a lot of people are like, "Well, if you've hated the episodes, why do you keep watching?" And the answer for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, was I've dedicated 8 to 10 years of my life to this. Maybe it will get better. Maybe if I watch this episode, it will get better. And I feel like even as like people kept watching, I feel like people who kept watching and were anger tweeting was because I genuinely think that they wanted something better out of what was happening and was hoping that it would happen, and then credits roll on the Iron Throne and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
here we are.
I as I was working through like prepare for the episode, I was like, I think this is the first show that I read an article about the piracy. Like, I don't think we've ever kept piracy metrics for other shows, and maybe we had. It was just never on my radar, which is super interesting.
So far as I know, that was a big thing for anime. One of the ways that they
Oh
were able
yeah.
to track what got licensed was what were streamings, what were scans, like what were like people fan subbing and stuff like that. That helped push a lot of the decisions for American distribution. I don't think it does as much now because you have, I mean, we talked about it in our Crunchyroll episode, like multiple simuldubs and
Yeah.
simulcasts happening, but like piracy as a metric was used for that piece.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the other thing is I was looking at the chart of how, like, the more people watch, the more the ratings went down, and I was like, well, yeah, if there's so many more eyes on a thing, then there's gonna be more critics, which means that more people are gonna chime in into a conversation, and then so I feel like that affected. Obviously, there was a lack in quality, but I think also the fact that, and this may be a lot of people that are coming in late to the party, like they've been hearing the hype. They had 2 years to kind of prepare and rewatch everything for season 8, and then everybody else kind of waited 2 years as well, in between seasons, or almost 2 years. So you have all these new people, all these extra people talking, and not you can't fulfill everyone's, and I don't know that they fulfilled anyone's, but I don't know that anybody picked. Yeah, that's gonna be the guy that sits on the throne at the end.
Well, and that's the thing though. Like I'm fine with so I stopped reading fan fiction because it's just ripe for you to become angry at a thing because it didn't go the way that you wanted it to.
Mhm.
And so I very much try to not hold a show accountable to my expectations
Right.
because I am not the writer on that show. That said, when you foreshadow, use parallels, when you literally map it out for everybody and then don't do it, then we have a
Yeah,
problem.
and it's not
Which
it's
is
not
what
like
I
you're
think
not
what
like
happened.
aware. It's not like you're not aware of all this fanfic, right? Like how long did we go
Yeah.
waiting for John to become a Targaryen, and then
Yeah.
it didn't
Right.
fucking matter.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Like, I think because I think you are onto something, Danny. Like, when you have more people watching a thing, people will get mad when it doesn't go like what they expect. But I think that it's different with Game of Thrones in that like nothing seemed consistent from
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
end point to the journey, and I think that that's why people got more viscerally angry at this versus like Bucky and Sam didn't kiss because like we knew that wasn't going to happen anyway. So like you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like there's a difference between like a fanfic expectation and a personal fan expectation and
Yeah.
a expectation set from the show's perspective itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
definitely I was gonna say, I definitely think the biggest thing that you said that's like that sticks with me the most is like no one wanted that, right? Like if I
Yeah,
think about it, I
they
think
made nobody happy.
nobody was happy because if I think about it, of like like what's like the other biggest controversy in like geekdom, like the Last Jedi is like very like, oh, I didn't want this, didn't happen, but some people were happy. Lots and lots of people were happy with that movie. Nobody was happy with the way that that ended.
And I think part of it, like ultimately, I think why you end up with people so frustrated, and for me, I don't only speak from like my perspective, right? I kept watching because I kept thinking like they're not gonna do this. Like they've literally set all of this up. They can't do this. And for me, my big thing was Daenerys because I was like the entirety of the series, and I don't think that Daenerys is infallible. Like I'm not one of those people, but I do think that Danny's entire story has been defined by flashbacks and her push against becoming what her family was known for. And I think the ease with which she was dropped into that role after spending so much time being aware and cognizant about it and being a pretty good leader strategically, that's what bugged me because it was one of those where it was like, oh, we've built her up to be somebody who knows her history and past, so she will not enact this, to like all of a sudden, screw all of the people around me who I personally brought to tell me how to do
Yeah.
right.
things.
Yeah, if it was a
I'm gonna
gradual
go light
progression
some
throughout the
fires.
season, that probably would have made more sense, right? If you like, give it to, if she wants to burn down everything, let her burn down everything, but like make it make sense at
And
least.
well,
But
see,
I
and that's
think,
the thing, because I actually thought that like Homegirl acted her ass off, and those scenes are brilliant.
no,
The
yeah,
Yeah.
taking a King's Landing is beautifully done.
yeah,
Like she's genuinely intimidating, and for like a small ass white woman, I'm terrified of her, and that's cool. But it made no sense canonically given what you did for her the rest of the time.
Yeah, and it feels like the one thing I didn't appreciate was that it kind of felt like the fact that she lost John, like is that the main, like is that the last straw that made Danny turn? And I was like, she's been she's had so many other things. She's overcome so many other things. So and her character has been so great. And
Yeah,
then now she loses her nephew, which is also weird. A whole that's a
her
whole other
nephew
thing.
husband.
Her nephew husband, and now she can't be with him because, or now he might take the throne from her or whatever. And then that destroys everything that we've been building.
Yeah. Well, and the other
yeah,
thing is too is like she straight up killed like was fine with her brother getting killed. She understood where she needed to be in succession to power, so it makes sense for her to make sure he doesn't take power.
I
But
was
like
fine with that as well.
she wouldn't be that emotional about it. She'd be like, oh yeah, okay, another person who's gonna take something from me, that's fine. I've dealt with this before. Like girl's
yeah.
been through so much trauma and shit, but this is the thing that makes you go mad, Quing.
Yeah,
This
and I think the warning signs were there. I mean, it's easy to be like, oh well, in retrospect, we should have known it was going to be like this. But if you go back, and I know Danny said you don't really look at like the interviews and stuff, but the interviews leading up to this like finale and then this season were like really cringy and not good. I put a quick like 3 minute thing in our show notes of some of it, but it just really like they were all just really acting like really negatively. It's not one of those things like where they didn't want to spoil things. They just seemed generally unhappy.
Mm.
yeah.
Uh Kit Harington like literally called the finale disappointing when asked about it. Peter Dinklage was pretty vocal that his character stopped being, you know, his character. He stopped being smart, started just
Yeah.
doing dumb things for no reason. Varys's actor obviously was clearly disappointed by the way that his character went out, and it was just a common theme. So
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for me, prior to the last the back part of the show, but like in that season, I don't remember which episode it is, but it's when Missende dies. That was the moment for me where I was like, this is not correct, because she was somebody who fought so hard for agency, and like she could have taken it into her own hands. Like if she was gonna die, like I would have much rather had it been like from herself, and then she's gone, and I'm just like, why is this happening? Why?
yeah,
Like she was a strong character, like both her and Grey Worm, and I really hate that they both just got the short end of the stick with everything.
yeah. Yeah, and my kind of like discussion question was going to be here, like, do you agree with the ratings as the season went on? But I think it's pretty clear, given our consensus. So I'll move on from there because somehow this still won a bunch of stuff. Like, despite how angry people were, it still had 32 Emmy nominations. It had and two wins. It had outstanding drama, beating Better Call Saul, beating Bodyguard, beating Killing Eve, Ozark, Poise, Succession, and This Is Us, and outstanding actor in a drama series, Peter Dinklage, which is fair
Okay,
because Peter Dinklage.
so real quick, it is hard because again, the score, the
Oh,
cinematography, the costuming, the acting, like all of it is like S tier. The script is just booty. Like
Yeah,
it is so hard. Like this is probably one of the best examples of like everything being perfect and it's still not working, because like I do believe that season deserves some awards,
yeah.
but like not for an overall overarching story. Like it was
yeah,
just bad from that perspective. But like everything else was perfect, and it really hurts at how much you could tell everybody put into it. Kind of like Danny said earlier, like how much the actors put into these things. And then
yeah. I mean, a lot of the nominations do make sense because it does have a lot of costuming nominations and things like that. But I think where it kind of falls off is when it's winning Best Drama Series. Is kind of crazy, but it also does have an American Film Institute award from that year that it came out. I don't know if anyone cares, but it does have an MTV Movie Award for the best show.
Oh, that's the most important one, I think.
For Saturn Awards, it won the best fantasy television series, and Keith Harrington won Best Actor. Peter Dinklage won Best Supporting Actor, and Macy Williams won Best Performance by a Young Actor
Oh,
on a television series, and
never
of
mind.
course, a
Yeah,
lot of costuming awards.
yeah. That's Macy Williams is the best, the most important award. Never mind. Forget the MTV Awards.
Yeah, Macy Williams kills it. One of my favorite things leading up to this was Macy Williams like faking out on Fallon, the fake spoiler. I don't know if you've seen
That was
that.
so good. Yes, I love
Yeah,
that. I watch. Well, it comes up on TikTok all the time. But yeah,
yeah, it's great. I really and that's the thing here, and I kind of move into it here, but like there is good, like Kate said, there is good things in this series, and I can fully admit those things. Like, despite the characters doing things out of character, the acting is still well done, even if the writing doesn't hold up in the end. The cast, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, Danny, the cast gave literally everything they
oh yeah.
had to kind of save this ship, and it just wasn't enough. But you can't say that the actors didn't. No actor phoned it in that season for sure.
No, I think now that we're talking about some of our favorite things at the end or the good, uh, I am a big fan. Other than Braun, I am a big fan of the new small council. Like I went online and I looked up who ended up on the small council at the end, and those are all some of my favorite characters. I dressed up as Sam for Halloween 1 year because we have a similar physical form, and I got the beard and everything. So that small council at the end of the show, which is one of the last things we see, like I said, other than Braun, I don't know that Master of Coin, I don't know that he should be there, but yeah, everyone else in that they're great. Like I love each and every one of them. I'm very happy that Sam, like his arc in the show, although it's not the main thing, it's really interesting. Like he has a lot of growth in the show and goes through a lot of tragedy because he got some, he took a few licks,
Yeah.
but he never gave up, and I love that. And I like Sam Turley is one of my favorite ones in the show.
Yeah, see, this is why you're here, Danny, because I forgot that I like all the characters in the small council. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that they're there, actually. That's a good small council. I still don't like the whole, Bran the Broken, whatever.
Brand
I
the
stopped caring.
Broken, what a name.
I stopped caring about him season 2, so I was like, ugh,
Look,
everyone. He was my
I
last
am
choice.
still mad and frustrated that boy who stares at trees is apparently fit to rule the frickin' Seven Kingdoms.
It's okay. We have this small council. They're legit. They're a little bit of
Yeah.
all of our favorite people from the
The small
bad
council
people.
is good, but also I'm still mad that Sansa only got the north, which is fine because I guess that's what she wanted. But like at
Yeah.
the same time, I'm just like, you built her into a really good character who became strategic, who definitely took after Catelyn and like
Mhm.
started embracing who she was, and then you're just like, and you get one thing. You're not even considered for other things, and I'm just kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't like
Yeah.
this.
I like that. I kind of like it. That's what they wanted. They don't want to be part of the Seven Kingdoms anyway. But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I guess it would be fine if there hadn't been so much growth that had her interacting with different areas. Like
Yeah, being
a
like
lot
a good queen. Basically.
exactly. Well, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like she was good.
Mhm.
And and Arya makes sense dipping because
Yeah, why
Arya
was
shouldn't be a queen.
She wasn't
Like,
even
she doesn't
in
want
Westeros
it.
for half the show.
Yeah.
Arya's like, I don't need this. This isn't for me. Y'all figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go do faceless shit over somewhere else.
Except not in season 8, because why would you, use anyone's actual character powers more than just killing
Right.
Walder Frey, I guess.
Well, she did the knife thing. So like, she did the knife thing.
The knife thing was very good.
And
I loved it.
and on that, the first 2 episodes, more or less, was kind of what we expected from season 8. It's what we wanted. It was big
Yeah.
battles. It was like characters finally meeting in
Oh,
the field.
I guess
all the
I'll-
characters coming together. It was happening.
I would like to replace all of my 8.4 comments with 8.3. That's where it's that's
Yeah.
that's it. But I definitely, like, I wrote a piece about Arya Stark after like the introduction and everything because I actually think like Arya becoming a woman in the sense of season 8 and owning who she is as a person, like it shows that like it completes the arc of her character
Mhm.
so strongly. And then they just throw her away. But like at least for like the opening of the season, she's very, very good.
And it was one of the things that they actually paid off. They set up the knife in the beginning, in the first season. She ended up with the knife, and then the knife went around a bunch of places, but it found its way back to Arya's hands, where she could be the one to actually use it
Exactly.
and defeat the Night King.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a good scene too, because like Kate mentioned
Oh, yeah.
before, and continue on to like what is good and what I enjoyed. The visuals and cinematography are great in so many of the set pieces. I didn't have the issue where everything was too dark. I don't know, just because I don't know if because we were using a projector maybe, but we didn't have the issue of like that whole scene being too dark. So
Same.
we did get to enjoy it. But you also have things like Rhaegal's death, Jon flying on Rhaegal after so long of being built up of him being able to ride dragons, the Battle of Winterfell, Dany's siege of King's Landing,
This is
the Hound
also-
versus the Mountain.
I believe too, this is also the longest continuously shot battle sequence since
yeah.
Helm's Deep.
Yeah, and it pays off great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Like we said before too, Arya doing anything in this season is great.
Yeah.
Even like the little things that don't really pay off later, but like Brienne being knighted
Oh
is
my God,
such
that-
a powerful and beautiful
Okay,
scene.
you know what though? Like, yes, that's powerful and it's great. And then they make Homegirl like all focus on a dude and cry. And
That's
I
what I was
hate
gonna say,
it because that's not who
Before
Brienne
it got
was.
bad, it was really good.
Everything that happened in that room with the chimney, up until that point, but everything prior, all the conversations, all the characters
It
had,
was really good.
that
Yeah.
set like needs to be moved to some kind of museum or something,
Yeah. Well,
because it was one of the like best places that they had
Yeah.
scenes that were so powerful for everyone. There was a lot of growth and a lot of kind of like finishing people's arcs.
yeah.
In
There's a
that
lot of
set,
recognition too of like where they were and where they are
yeah,
now that I think worked really well in that scene.
Yeah, so there are really great things, and it does to win some of those awards. The acting was great. It's just really like it's the script that doesn't pay off all of those things, and of course, like what would pop culture TV be without famously bad last seasons? So what come to my mind immediately from shows that I liked was Dexter and Heroes and How I Met Your Mother and Scrubs and Lost. But I don't think any of those shows have a drop in fandom like Game of Thrones did, at least directly after. I think after a couple years, I think people are getting back into it and we're remembering that we did like the things, but after Game of Thrones, I still recommended like Scrubs to people. I still love Scrubs. I'll watch episodes of Scrubs. It was not something that Game of Thrones wasn't something I was recommending to
Yeah.
and I know we talked about this like a little bit at the beginning, but as a kind of like rounding out of this whole topic here, how does something go from having a stranglehold on pop culture for 10 years to not? And Danny said at the beginning doesn't really know much about D&D. It was because they didn't really have much else. One of them had done X-Men Wolverine Origins
oh boy,
movie, and one of them hadn't done anything, but still went on to have the largest Stimulcast episode streamed in 134 countries. 4% of all of Americans had watched the show. It was the most liked show on all social media platforms. It had a record-setting 1.5 million people signing a petition for competent rewriters to rewrite the series and all that thing. So widely popular to everyone just being like, all right, I'm out.
yeah,
Yeah.
You can at
Wolverine.
least watch How I Met Your Mother, but like not
I
watch like that last
also
episode.
I also think that like that's one of the things that makes it hard because like when we look back at like some of like these bad shows, I feel like it's always like one episode. Like it's the actual ending, not the ending season, or the ending season is so vastly different than everything else that you can still like Scrubs. I literally say watch everything but the last season because you don't need the last season. It's literally not like connected or even features
Yeah,
all of the same
it's a
actors
different
from the
show.
rest of it. And
Yeah.
I think that because you can draw those clear lines between it gets a little bit easier. Whereas like it's funny because like with The Office, the last two seasons are not great, but I will always tell people to watch that finale episode because the
Hmm.
finale episode for that is so important and like a look back that fits. Whereas like I feel like with Game of Thrones, like one of the reasons you do have like such a big like departure and like flight from the fandom is because it was like four episodes of just character letdown after character letdown, and you can't really consolidate it to one episode or one plot. And so I think it gets harder to like pull stuff apart, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's real hard to be like, hey, stop watching in season 6, dude. Everything starts to get really good.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's like why it kind of like hits different or like makes people feel so viscerally angry is because like every different episode from 4 on, you have a different character that is just for lack of a better words being shit on in their in their writing and choices. And so it can't be like, well, if you want to preserve this, stop watching at this episode. Like Lost, still never seen the last episode of Lost, but I enjoyed all the other 100 something and like that kind of stuff. Like there's really
Yeah.
not a place where you can say, hey, dip here and you're still fine.
Oh, I like Lost. I like the ending too. I appreciate how everything wrapped up. I understand there's a lot of questions, but I don't mind. Like, yeah, I like seeing the top spinning and not knowing what's happening afterwards. Like, like I don't mind being left with a bunch of questions because I could just revisit it and just kind of make up my own mind about what's going on. Because I did see Lost on the notes and I was like, okay, I understand why there's a lot of people that, yeah, it's so ambiguous that you're like, okay, but to me it's like, well, then I get to come up with
Yeah.
whatever the ending is,
Yeah.
And
which
I think
shouldn't be
that's
my
fair.
job.
To be fair, I have never watched it. And I'm too scared to now. Like I've gone so long without watching it that I can't form an opinion on it. Therefore, I will never watch it because like I don't know how this is gonna change. But I think
Yeah.
that
But
that's fair because I do like some ambiguous endings.
Yeah, I just like endings that make sense, at least in some kind of string, and we didn't get that there. But it's okay because there is lots of Game of Thrones in the future, and if you like, the story and the intrigue, there are stuff coming down the pipe, kind of as we wrap up here. But the Game of Thrones Twitter is like on a mad dash to like get things back to where they kind of were. As I'm assuming to make Game of Thrones like how it was in the old days of 2011, where we're following along on Twitter to this stuff. Um, April 10th, they for the 10-year anniversary, they had a marathon to binge the whole series for a marathon. I wasn't aware of this. I did not participate in the marathon.
Did not even see it on my timeline.
Yeah,
I'm gonna recommend that they curated list of like the thematical episodes to watch, like maybe people's arcs. Yeah, if you go back to the website or the YouTube channel, they curated a list of like all these episodes kind of have the same journey for a character. They're either the character specific or like maybe they're the battles. They made some really cool lists that I think that don't include a lot of the last episodes, which makes sense. Uh, but they are kind of fun. Like if I was to rewatch, and I've been thinking about rewatching Game of Thrones. Uh, but if you don't want to rewatch the whole thing, I think looking through some of those lists, and I'll try to send the link to you guys so you can put it on your notes.
yeah,
Uh,
that'd be great.
yeah, it seems like a good fun approach to rewatching revisiting some of the highlights of the show.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what they did, like in their marathon. They were like asked people like for like their best moments and things like that. And then on April 14th, which is the anniversary, they tweeted "Winter is coming," and the quote tweets on that thread are hilarious. And I'll put that in the show notes
I
so you
just
can
saw
view that at your
everybody being
leisure.
like, no, stop.
Like, no,
No, it's
stop,
not.
ma'am, it's April. Go away. And then on April 26th, they just started like randomly tweeting multiple tweets of fire emojis and like retweeting other series that have fire in it, which I assume is to announce like the House of Dragons spinoff that's in production because there are multiple spinoffs in the works.
The
So
funny
House of
thing,
Dragons
I
just started production.
I
Yeah.
don't care about that one. I really don't. Like, and you know what? I don't want to watch like the lily white haired Targaryens again. You know
Yeah,
what
I
I
don't really
want?
either.
I want the fucking sand snakes. I want all of the stuff from that part of Game of Thrones, which we never
The other
got.
the other part of the world.
The
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
So
the one I'm the most excited about, and I know that maybe you were going there, the Tales of Duncan and Egg,
yeah.
because not only do I haven't read the book, but I love the comic. I love the characters. They adapted the first two novellas into a comic. I think Marvel and somebody else, but then Marvel bought out the comic, the reprints. But also, it inspired one of my favorite movies, A Knight's Tale, with Mark Addy. So it all kind of comes back to that, because A Knight's Tale is very loosely inspired by the first novella of the Tales of Duncan Egg. So that's probably the one I'm the most excited for.
Yeah, there's a few. Some I'm more excited than others because I'm kind of in the cape boat where I'm not really not that excited about House of Dragon. So if you're not familiar with kind of like the premise of these upcoming shows that are coming out, you have House of Dragon is kind of going to be like the big one and really going to set the tone for the rest of how the slate works. But this is just 300 years before the events of Game of Thrones. If you know anything about Game of Thrones, they always say, 300 years ago when the Targaryens, who knows what is true or not. So I guess we're going to find out what's true or not because it's basically going to be covering like the Dance of the Dragons and the Targaryen succession in a 10 episode long order coming in 2022. They just started filming and doing the production and stuff like that this month. Like Danny mentioned, Tales of Duncan and Egg follow the adventures of Sir Duncan the Tall and a young Aegon Targaryen. And this takes place 90 years before the start of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. And basically going to be more of like a kind of fun thing where you have, Duncan and the Targaryen being like the Kingsguard and things like that. Should be more fun. That one I'm more excited about because, like Danny said, the adapted material for that is pretty fun.
And I believe that I may be wrong, and maybe people are gonna be angry, but I believe the Maester at the Night's Watch is Aegon, all grown
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
like,
that's what that stuff is. That stuff I'm excited about because I've always wanted to know, like, what did this guy do?
So
What was he doing?
I could potentially be excited for this if they go like the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern arc like type thing. So
Oh
I don't know
yeah,
if y'all know like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Like they're essentially like these side characters in Hamlet who have like taken on a whole like their own pop culture life where like it's just like dark comedy and them like doing like I think that I could get behind that if they did this in that style.
yeah. I know. I know. Tag and Bink is the equivalent of that in Star Wars, where they just kind of have they live through all the events, but like through these side characters. So that would be pretty cool actually.
Yeah, then you have 10,000 Ships, which is the working title of a spinoff in development that will deal with the tale of Nymeria fleeing the Dragon Lords in Essos and crossing over into the channel in the Summer Sea, where she burned down an entire fleet of ships, 10,000 ships. And this would take place 1,000 years before A Song of Ice and Fire, making it the earliest project to go the farthest back. And this is more of a, because if you remember, Arya's direwolf was named Nymeria, and she named her specifically after, this tale. That's where that's coming from. Then you have
That
Nine
could
Voyage.
be interesting.
Yeah, either take me like way back or take me forward. Like that's all I
Yeah.
really care about. Nine Voyages, unlike Tales of Duncan and Egg or 10,000 Ship, this spin-off series would have a direct tie-in into the House of Dragons. And this, we don't have a whole lot, but I think this is really just going to be one of the more of the things of, if the House of Dragons does good, then we'll get this more of the other side, kind of like what Kate's talking about with like the Sea of Snakes and those things. So I think just depending on how well it does, but who knows.
I think what bothers me with this is like I don't think anybody should plan a spin-off series of a series they're currently developing because that means that there are going to be gaps in the storytelling so they can push you to the new thing.
Yeah, not wrong
That's
there.
what scares me.
There's also a possible show called Flea Bottom, and this is a spin-off that would give viewers a kind of gritty glimpse of the everyday lives of citizens residing in the poor sections of King's Landing, which sounds terrible.
This is the
But
one I least want. Like why?
yeah, I know, but
Do I need the Wire but in King's Landing? Like is this what we're
yeah,
going?
I mean, and then you have people who like started in like Flea Bottom and like work their way up, I guess. So I mean, I guess that would be kind of cool to see. But I've seen enough of Flea Bottom to know that I don't want a series about it. There's also an untitled animated series, which we don't really have a lot of details for. Again, this is probably a wait and see kind of thing. Books. If you know anything about Game of Thrones books, we had a whole series before that we got a new book. So George R. R. Martin would not survive as a mangaka. We know this 110%. He cannot meet any of those deadlines. But book 6, The Winds of Winter, has basically been worked on for 10 years now. In March 2020, Martin had said that he was writing every day and hoped that it would be published, or he'd be done with it by 2020, that he would be done with it by 2021. I don't know if there's any updated thing on that, but I just know that we've been waiting since 2011 for him to, give us information on the book. Then book 7 is also slated, which is titled A Dream of Spring, which is supposed to be the finale of the series. In May 2019, he said that he wasn't going to start working on A Dream of Spring until he finished Winds of Winter. Man is 72 years old. I don't know if he has another 10 years to write a book, so I don't even know if we're ever going to get like the finish to the series. But that's what we kind of have slated for the books in the future if we ever do get them.
The the
Which
last book.
I also wonder too like how much of this is because I own all the books. I never finished reading them. But I wonder how much of the Game of Thrones issue comes from like the Full Metal Alchemist syndrome of just like
Yeah.
I've run out of stuff. Let's do things. You know what I mean? Like how much of the good in the seasons, like where do they specifically, do you know like where the books ran out specifically?
Yeah, so I think I have to go back and look at our notes, but I believe it is season 6 is
Okay.
basically kind of where we taper off,
Yeah.
where they're just kind of like using things, and then season 7, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but season 7 is like they're getting like little tidbits from George R. R. Martin, and then they're kind of like doing things.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds all right. I think because the book at the time, I think was it season 5 maybe that the books kind of ran out, but they still had a lot of things from
Yeah,
George.
other things
And
to
yeah,
cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think season 6 is like one where we run out of that, and they're kind of just
yeah.
going and doing things at
Okay.
that point.
Because yeah, I wonder if that may have been like one of the big issues too, just like that Full Metal Alchemist syndrome. Like it was
Yeah.
good when it was on the rails, but once it goes off,
But go watch The Conqueror of Shambhala because that's a sick movie. Like even if you take it outside of the Full Metal Alchemist canon, it's still pretty cool to see alchemy and like real steampunk science in the same movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I really have, to be honest. I mean, I think I just wanted to we had to do something, and I think having a conversation about something that was a huge cultural staple, 2 years ago. I think coming away from this conversation for me, and I'll kind of like jump off kind of some of these final thoughts, I guess. But I think rewatching it now with someone who hasn't rewatched it and kind of like seeing the magic of the show work in real time, and knowing that even after all this time, as someone who hasn't seen it, who wasn't there, when all this was going on, still enjoy the show, really shows the merits of this show is great, and having these moments are kind of like invaluable. And conversations like this are kind of invaluable at the end of the day, right? Because it's a good conversation about something that I didn't want to talk about for 2 years straight. So I just appreciate the show in general for just kind of being good for fandom in general, because when we have these splits on like if something was good or bad, it's a terrible split and it's exhausting. But here, everyone came together and rose up against the tyranny to hate the way our show ended. So I just appreciate the fandom and the show itself for
Yeah.
giving those. And I don't know how many of these spin-offs I'll be watching week to week, but it's something. I don't know.
Can we scrap that Flea Bottom and then just get a Bravo spinoff?
Oh
I would
yeah,
take
dude,
that.
Bank of
Give me
Bravos,
Bravos.
give it to
Yeah.
Like
me,
you can
please.
include all the House of Black and White stuff. Like just, there's so much more in Bravos that you could do with that in Flea Bottom.
Honestly, I'ma just say it. From reading this, it really feels like they said, let's pick the whitest areas of Westeros and stay right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
When
exactly
like
what this sounds like.
that's not the cool shit. Like
No.
like the coolest stuff that like I have wanted to go into isn't like the traditional like War of the Roses like European stuff. Like the cool things that Game of Thrones did was input all of these extra pieces of lore and show that the world was bigger and start to show that the world was bigger than just the Seven Kingdoms. And I think
Yeah.
the fact that we're stuck in that, I feel like we're kind of missing those important pieces. And also, like, I just don't care about the Targaryens anymore. I'm sorry. You made me not care about them by what you did with
Yeah,
season 8.
I'd rather go like old Valyria. Like give me like the
I
old
would
old
take
stuff
that.
if
Yes,
you're gonna
yes,
give it to me.
yes.
I
I
want
would
to see
take
The
that.
old
a
stuff.
baby Pedro Pascal,
Oh, I would. Oh, please.
baby Viper.
Maybe that's also what it is. Just give Pedro Pascal his own series pre-head
Oh
smash. I
no,
will
I
take
forgot
that.
about that. I had blocked that out. I'm
I,
coming up to that soon.
I will say I'm kind of I know they recently announced that play, which is like that big tournament that they mentioned in the show. I would be interested in going to see something like that because I'd be interested to see how it's adapted to a theater format. Obviously, I don't think there's plays going on right now, but when that happens again, I think they scheduled maybe for next year. That whole tournament sounds super cool. I'm sure people that have read the books they can get a little bit more out of that if they touched on it. But that just sounds like all the characters that are supposed to be at that tournament. Like it sounds like an interesting mix of people, and like a lot of stuff happen because everybody's really snarky when they throw the other tournament where they all kind of meet up again.
Yeah, I like to see. I mean, stuff like that be fun, right? But I don't need to know how the Targaryens took power, 300 years ago. It feels
They had
tedious.
dragons. That's
And I
how.
think
Yeah,
yes,
it's not that hard.
exactly. Well, that, and I think too, like one of the things is like for me, I feel like what they're gonna do in the future, we already know because we've heard it talked about so much from existing characters. And like I guess it's cool that you're going into like things that informed like how characters were. But like I don't know, it feels just like a miss for me. And
Yeah,
it
it
kind of
feels.
worries me.
Yeah, it feels like a big miss for me. Especially when you have like the Mandalorian that's like separate, but like in there, and its
Exactly.
own thing,
Use
and
the
it's
worlds.
contained.
Don't
Yeah,
force
Yeah.
it into the story. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Which is
yeah,
weird because HBO's been giving us some really cool stuff recently, like HBO. I mean, Watchmen and Lovecraft Country. So they can get more diverse worlds. Like they know people like that stuff. So I don't know why they're kind of honing in on this like one piece of lore.
Yeah. And the
yeah.
thing is, I love dragons. I think dragons are dope. But like
Yeah.
kind of what you said, Adrian, I don't need the stuff that I've heard about already. I've already
Yeah,
had the story
unless
told
we're
to me.
fighting other stuff, like
Yeah.
I
I
don't
would
know.
take Old Valyria though.
Yeah,
That I would
Olivia would be
take,
fun.
and I think I would also take it because I really like the way
Yeah.
that conlang is built out, like the
Yeah.
language is
Yeah,
built
yeah.
out for Valyrian.
I
And I
do want
feel
to.
like
I do want to see that giant dragon that they've talked about in
Yeah, that's
live action.
enormous. It's like
Yeah.
4 times like
yeah.
it's just big, big, big.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's all I have. I hope it was a much more positive conversation than I was expecting, which I think is really great. So I've kind of given my final thoughts, but we'll go with Cade, and then Daniel will wrap us up with his wholesome closing thoughts.
Yeah, I want some time that I spent back with season 8 for sure, and I'm never going to get it back. But like I also like prepping for this episode and thinking about it, like I'll link him in the show notes. Like I did write 2 really good pieces, and honestly the Sansa piece that I wrote about her was a really personal one of like how you do write somebody like from a place of trauma and being informed of it and that kind of stuff. And like I can appreciate that. And I think that's what is hard for me is like it's really easy to throw Game of Thrones away until you start to remember the things that made you love it and the things that you think that it did well because like it sucks. Like I feel like Game of Thrones is a show of extremes. It's a show that did things new and innovative and different and extremely well, and it's also a show that completely wrecked everything for the characters that they built up. But I think the importance is like as we look back on it, like it is still a show that like united a lot of people together, and even when it was bad, it you like united everybody together in their hate for it. Like, and I think that like my path through Game of Thrones is a good one, and I can't throw it all away because of like one crappy season. Um, and I don't know. I don't really know. I'm not all negative. Yes, it was booty, but like also I'm not gonna throw out 7 seasons because of the one bad one. And I think that like having distance from it, I've understood that now. Like you can say like, oh yeah, this was a really bad season, but to say all of Game of Thrones was a waste of time is a big lie because it wasn't. And you were tweeting with it and you were having watch parties and you were doing all of
Mhm.
that stuff all leading up to that. And I think that that's kind of like I feel like now we're so far away from it that I think people can kind of look back and have a more informed and like less visceral reaction. I definitely had a visceral reaction after, and like Adrian kind of noted, like I didn't want to talk about it for 2 years. So like this is the first time I've really talked about Game of Thrones since then. But yeah, that's my
Yeah.
final thoughts.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. We're in a lot of the same boat there, which is great. So even if it's just hate watching, Flea Bottom, I'm down with
Oh yeah, that's the other thing.
that.
I don't think they need to do much for these future shows because at the very least everybody's going to tune in to hate watch it.
For sure. And Danny, you want to close us out with your
Yeah,
final
sure.
thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm glad I got to talk to you guys about this. It's so the way I kind of look at stuff, and I'm lucky that I get to pick and choose what I talk about with in stuff, or even on our own podcast, or when I get invited to stuff, because I like tend to focus on the things that I like to talk about. As if I don't like something, I'm not really gonna go on and like criticize it, or like I won't recommend it, but I don't actively like put it down. Um, so I tend to focus on the positive, and I think overall Game of Thrones gave me a net positive experience. Like I said, we had really good times just watching and doing stuff and hanging out with my friends, doing all this stuff. Like I can't. There hasn't been a show since uh, that happens, like where we all kind of get together and watch it. And maybe because, like Kate mentioned earlier, we don't really have appointment television anymore. So hopefully some of these streaming services will change that. I think Amazon's doing it kind of a little bit because they release their Friday stuff really comes out on Thursday night. So we could have stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Game of Thrones. I'm glad that we got to talk about it and revisit it. I'm definitely gonna go back and rewatch it now. I think after this conversation, and then this show had Starbucks in it, and I love Starbucks. So there we go.
That's a perfect way to. That's perfect. 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 Well, we thank you so much, Danny, for coming on. We really appreciate it, and look forward to having you back for whatever wholesomeness you want to come talk about.
Sure.
Well, Danny, why don't you tell everybody where they can find, hear, see all of your work?
Oh, sure. So you can find me personally on my Twitter at Echo Spider. You can follow my podcast at Next Issue Podcast. Next Issue Pod. I always mess that up. And we just got our custom link for YouTube, so I can actually say the custom link.
Yay!
YouTube, yeah, youtube.com/c/ Next Issue Podcast. We do a live show where we talk about comics and different things. And then just I do a lot of videos reacting to like trailers and stuff that's coming up. And then like I mentioned, I'm gonna do some Game of Thrones focused episodes in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. But once again, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for coming on. So as always, if you like what you're doing, head on over to But Why Though PC. We are verified on Discord, guys, after a very long fight to get here. If you want to come in, talk about the podcast, talk about general pop culture, join some movie nights, head over to discord.gg/BUTWHYTHO. And then if you want to get in on some Patreon action and support us a little bit more, head on over to patreon.com/ButWhyThoughPC. And you can find me on Twitter at OMammothRandier, where I'm rewatching all of Castlevania again. So, talking a lot about the things in there. A lot of thirst. Adrian?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at SuperRuiz93, SUPERRUIZ93.
Oh, it's so weird not having that to close it out. You can find us hate watching things. I don't know.